Just out of the delivery room, my husband handed our son to the wealthy young woman. He wanted to give our son to the young woman. I desperately shook my head, but he called me selfish. 3 days later, the young woman posted a photo on her social media post of them with the baby, looking as intimate as a family of 3. The caption read, "A gift from above." Enduring the intense pain of my C-section, I rushed to the young woman's house, only to see my husband feeding her fruit. The child will only have a future with her as his biological mother. You should be more sensible. Later, I finally came to my senses and calmly handed him a divorce agreement, but he held the child and begged me to return. The phone screen glowed. Little harsh in the dim hospital room, I lowered my gaze, staring blankly at Onyx's social media post. In the photo, Knox held the small swaddling blanket, and Onyx was pressed close to him, her head almost resting on his shoulder. Both looked down at the baby in their arms, a gentle smile on their faces. Onyx's caption was, "A gift from above." Kyle, the gift was my son. It fulfilled someone else's wish. The C-section incision suddenly throbbed with pain. I gently placed a hand on my abdomen and curled a sweat beading on my forehead, but the pain in my heart far surpassed the physical wound. The day the baby was born, Knox told me Ella had terminal cancer and wanted to see her only daughter have a child. As long as Onyx had a child under her name, Logan was willing to give that child an inheritance, even if the child wasn't Onyx's biological offspring. I couldn't understand how these wealthy families think. I only knew this was my child, and no one could take him away. But Knox, as if utterly deluded, insisted on handing the baby to Onyx, having just had a C-section. I had no strength and could only watch helplessly as he took the child away. With trembling fingers, I gently swiped across the photo, zooming in. Knox's fingers gently supported the bottom of the swaddling blanket, and Onyx's hand rested on the back of his. They truly looked like a harmonious family of 3. My gaze was fixed on the tiny, tightly wrapped figure. My son, only 3 days old. He was personally handed over to another woman by his father. The child had been taken away 3 days ago, but there was no sign of him being returned. Knox hadn't even come to the hospital again. I couldn't wait any longer. Even though my body hadn't fully recovered, I ripped out the suit and stumbled out of the hospital. Ella was considered Knox's benefactor. She had sponsored him throughout his graduate studies. After graduation, he went to work at Blake, where he was highly valued. Plus, he often brought me to visit Logan's parents, so I knew where Logan lived. The taxi driver, seeing me still in the hospital gown, politely asked if I needed help. I waved my hand, simply enduring the discomfort in my abdomen, and told him I was fine. Soon, we arrived at Logan's entrance. Logan's nanny opened the door. She paused, startled by my appearance. I forcefully pushed the nanny aside and rushed inside. I had expected to see only Onyx, but I hadn't expected Knox to be there too. He was sitting on the sofa, holding a cherry, carefully offering it to Onyx, who was leaning back on the other end of the sofa. Onyx, dressed in pajamas, smiled faintly, her lips slightly parted as she took the cherry. The scene was so intimate, as if they were the married couple. Yet, I had been calling Knox for days, wanting him to bring the baby back. He always claimed to be busy, dealing with company matters, and had no time. So this was what he meant by no time. When Knox saw me, he immediately stood up, rushed over to me, and asked in an accusatory tone, "Mason, what are you doing running out of the hospital instead of staying put?" Onyx's reaction was a bit slower than Knox's. She didn't even immediately put down the cherry pit, just sat up slightly. She looked up at me, her beautiful eyes showing no surprise, only a condescending scrutiny. Suddenly, a baby's cry came from the bassinet nearby. I snapped back to reality, instinctively wanting to rush over, but Knox blocked me. Onyx stood up, walked to the bassinet, picked up my baby, and gently cooed to him. My mind went blank. My eyes seemed only capable of seeing Onyx holding my child. I hadn't even held my child since he was born. I struggled, reaching out, trying to break free from Knox's grasp. "Give me back my child." Onyx, while soothing the baby, looked at me and said with faint concern, "Harper, you just gave birth. Your health is important. How can you run around like this? What if your incision reopens?" Her voice was soft, her expression worried, but her gaze subtly swept across my face, carrying the disdain of the wealthy. Knox reached out to grab my arm, his tone stern and agitated. "Mason, what's wrong with you now? Ella is still recovering upstairs. What kind of scene are you making, shouting like this? Go back to the hospital, now." I violently slapped his hand away, screaming with all my might, "Knox, This is the child I carried for 10 months. You're trying to snatch him from me and give him to another woman. Knox clamped onto my flailing arm, forcibly pulling me away from Onyx, his movements rough and completely disregarding my abdominal incision. Can't you stop being so selfish? You know Ella saved my life. Making her happy is what matters most right now. Besides, the child will have a better life with Onyx. After saying that, he abruptly let go. My C-section incision hadn't fully healed. Suddenly, my vision went black, and the pain left me gasping for breath as my body uncontrollably collapsed downwards. Knox seemed startled by my pale face. He quickly stepped forward, gently supported me, and said helplessly, "Oliver, you're the child's mother. You wouldn't want people to say her mother is just an insurance salesperson, would you?" I looked up, meeting Knox's eyes, somewhat incredulous. Both Knox and I were from Michelle. What was harder than getting into university was finding the money to attend. That year, Knox and I both received admission letters, but for him to study without worry, I gave up university and went to Richard to sell insurance to earn his tuition. If I hadn't earned that tuition money from selling insurance to send him to university, he would never have met Ella. Now, with a more powerful backer, he actually said, I was just an insurance salesperson. Just then, Onyx, who had been observing coldly, spoke. "Harper, I know you're sad, and it's hard to let go, but..." She paused, then turned her gaze to Knox beside me, with a natural familiarity. "Tiffany is also doing this for the child's good. The child will only have a future with me. What Logan can't give him, you can never provide." After Onyx finished speaking, she lowered her head to look at the infant in her arms, her fingertips gently caressing his cheek. Her posture suggested she was the mother who had bestowed everything upon this life. I roared, "If you want a child, go have your own. Why are you stealing mine?" Hearing my words, Onyx chuckled as if she'd heard a joke, then added with a hint of entitlement, "I have a natural deficiency and can't conceive, nor do I want to go through that hardship. Tiffany is beautiful and intelligent. The child will surely be perfect." An air of upper-class pride permeated Onyx's very being, as if everything she did was her absolute right. Even if she snatched my child, I couldn't resist, but for some reason, I felt things weren't as simple as Onyx made them out to be. If she merely wanted a child, there were plenty in orphanages. Why did it have to be my child? But now I couldn't calm down to think. I just looked up at Knox and asked, "Is that what you think too?" Knox didn't look at me. He simply turned away, his tone resolute. "The child will have a better future with Logan. Since you're his biological mother, you should be more sensible." My whole body trembled, and I was racked with intense pain. I spoke in a hoarse voice, "Knox, whose future are you really trading my child for?" Knox seemed exposed. A flicker of shame crossed his face, but he quickly reverted to his previous cold demeanor. "Mason, don't say such unpleasant things. The child will get the best education and the best start in life with Onyx. This is all for his good. Do you really want to tie him to your side to suffer poverty and hardship?" Seeing Knox like this, tears slowly fell from my eyes. He spoke blandly now, but it was all just for his own future. Aligning with Logan, this powerful family, was enough for him to live a life of wealth and luxury. I raised my hand and firmly pressed my thumb into the fleshy part between my thumb and forefinger, forcing myself to calm down, and said word by word, "I am taking my child today." Knox grabbed my hand and pulled me directly towards the door, but he underestimated a mother's determination to take her child. I immediately broke free from his grasp, rushed to the coffee table, snatched the kitchen knife from the fruit bowl, and pointed the sharp blade at Knox. "Knox, give me back my child." Onyx finally showed some emotion when she saw me with the knife, but she was only slightly startled. Stepping back a few paces with the baby in her arms, Knox's face changed. He reached out, trying to calm me. "Oliver, don't be so impulsive. Put down the knife, and let's talk properly." I scoffed, not replying, and just lunged at him, brandishing the knife, but my strength was weak, and being in recovery, I had little energy. Knox easily disarmed me. As he took the knife, it grazed my arm. The pain instantly brought me back to my senses. I looked at Knox. I suddenly remembered that years ago, I had lost my first child because of him too. It was 2 years ago, not long after we married. I became pregnant. Knox spun me around, excitedly saying he was going to be a father. We happily planned our future, eagerly anticipating the arrival of this child, until that phone call came. Knox merely glanced at the screen, and his face instantly changed. He immediately grabbed his phone and went to the balcony, pulling the glass door shut. I vaguely heard him lower his voice, responding anxiously. Onyx. Don't cry, don't cry. Tell me slowly, what? Car crash. Which hospital? Okay, okay, I'm coming right away. Wait for me. Knox hung up and rushed back into the bedroom, grabbing his coat and putting it on with astonishing speed. My heart tightened. I propped myself up. It's so late. What happened? Knox spoke rapidly, not even glancing at me, his eyes filled with urgency and panic. Onyx was in a car accident. I have to go immediately. She's scared alone. Onyx was 6 years younger than us, 4 years. I had always treated her like a sister. I thought Knox felt the same way, so I didn't pay it much mind. Not long after Knox left, it started pouring rain outside. Half asleep, I answered Knox's call. Oliver, come to the hospital now. It's not convenient for me to take care of her. Being a girl, you'll find her a nurse tomorrow. As soon as Knox finished speaking, lightning flashed outside. I checked the time. It was 3 in the morning. I even wondered if I hadn't fully woken up, or if I had gotten up too abruptly and misheard him. Knox, I'm almost due. It's 3 in the morning, pouring rain, and you want me to go take care of another woman. Knox, however, didn't heed my words, simply stating with a hint of command, I've already called you a taxi. You're still some time away from your due date. I'll be fine. I stiffened in bed, my hand instinctively caressing my slightly swollen abdomen, a sense of unease growing in my heart. I wasn't a fool, of course. I wouldn't go out in this weather. It was later, when I was thirsty and went downstairs to get a glass of water, that I accidentally stepped in the water Knox had spilled earlier in his haste. I slipped and fell, my abdomen hitting the corner of a table. I screamed in pain instantly, falling to the floor and gasping agonizingly. Fortunately, my phone was beside me. I struggled to get up, enduring the pain, and grabbed my phone to call Knox, but it was busy, call after call. The messages I sent him went unanswered. Finally, with my last ounce of strength, my fingers trembling, I dialed 120. After that, I lost consciousness. When I woke up, I smelled a pungent odor of disinfectant. Under the harsh hospital room lights, I saw Knox. He had finally come. His hair was messy, his clothes wrinkled, and his face showed fatigue and a hint of guilt he couldn't quite conceal. Seeing me awake, Knox quickly stood up, came to my bedside, and took my hand. Oliver, how are you? Are you uncomfortable anywhere? I looked at him, my lips moved, and with all my strength, I whispered, the baby. Knox squeezed my hand, his eyes reddened, and his lips trembling. He said, the baby, we'll have another baby. Silence filled the hospital room. I looked at my flat abdomen, unable to accept that this child had just left me. Knox sat by the bed, head down, hands buried in his hair, his shoulders slightly trembling. I closed my eyes, unable to accept the truth. Long time later, he spoke in a hoarse voice. Onyx was also seriously injured, with multiple fractures and a concussion. She was terrified at the time, crying and clinging to me, not letting me leave. I didn't expect you to. At that moment, I felt a deep chill and considered divorcing him, but Knox knelt repeatedly, begging for my forgiveness, and even deleted all of Onyx's contact information in front of me. He also promised me that he only saw Onyx as a sister and would never neglect me again because of her. I loved him too much then, and in the moment of weakness, I forgave him. Knox did keep his word for a while. For the past 2 years, he hadn't seen Onyx again, devoting himself entirely to our family, becoming the perfect husband in everyone's eyes, until 2 years later, Ella was diagnosed with cancer and didn't know how long she had left. Ella only had one daughter, Onyx, and to put her mind at ease, she had always wanted her to get married or have a child. It was Knox who suggested having a child at that time. I thought at the time that Knox wanted a child, but looking back now, he had already planned this, using a child to trade for a future. My thoughts returned to the present. I had been vaguely led back to the hospital room by Knox. Logan had so many people. They certainly wouldn't just watch me live with the child, but I wouldn't give up on bringing my child back. Oliver, I'm doing this for the child, for our little family. Why can't you understand me? Knox's expression was somewhat helpless, as if he were truly wronged, and I was just an unreasonable shrew. I looked at him, expressionless. Knox, let's get a divorce. Divorce? Knox froze in place, as if he had heard some absurd joke. Mason, are you crazy? Over such a small matter? A small matter? In Knox's eyes, this was actually a small matter. I lay in the hospital bed. The nurse had already treated the wound on my arm, though my body no longer hurt much. My heart ached intensely. I stared at the ceiling, my voice calm. Knox, giving my newborn child away to another woman is not a small matter. Knox impatiently rushed to my side. Mason, can you stop being so selfish? Ella has been good to me, and I just want to repay her. Besides, the child will have a better life with Onyx. What's wrong with that? I slowly turned my head and looked at him. Knox hadn't put any effort into this child. I carried him for 10 months. I suffered the pain of premature labor. Yet now he wanted to effortlessly take the child away like this. Impossible, I said furiously. Knox, honestly, are you truly doing this for the child, or just so you can James? Knox's expression flickered with momentary panic, as if I had exposed him, but he quickly regained his righteous demeanor. What are you talking about? Of course, I'm doing this for the child. Can you give the child what Logan can? Private schools, overseas education, connections, do you have any of that? Besides, the child is just temporarily registered under Onyx's name. Legally, he's still our son. Once Ella passes and the inheritance is secured, we'll immediately take the child back. Then we'll have money. We won't have to squeeze into a small apartment anymore, and the child can receive the best education. All of this is for our family. Why can't you understand my intentions? I closed my eyes, not wanting to see his hypocritical face anymore. The Knox I once knew wasn't like this. In university, he would study hard all night in the library, while I saved every penny working outside to send him living expenses. He said then that once he succeeded, he would ensure I lived a good life. Now he had succeeded, yet he wanted to give our child away. I opened my eyes, my voice cold. Leave, tomorrow, you'll have a lawyer send you the divorce agreement. Knox's face changed. Mason, don't push it. The child is still at Logan. Do you think you can take him after a divorce? This sentence pierced my heart like a knife. Yes, Logan was well-connected and influential in capital city. How could I compete? But I had to find a way. That was my child, the one I carried for 10 months and almost died on the operating table for. I pointed to the door, my voice trembling but firm. Get out. Knox glared at me, finally slamming the door as he left. The hospital room finally grew quiet. I pulled out my phone and dialed a number I hadn't called in a long time. Hello, Mr. Thomas. This is Mason. I need your help. 3 days later, I was discharged from the hospital. During these 3 days, Knox didn't come to the hospital again. He only sent a few texts, saying the child was fine at Logan and telling me to stop making a fuss. Onyx even sent me a photo of the baby, telling me he was sleeping soundly. I turned off my phone screen, looked at the woman across the coffee table, suppressed my emotions, and recounted the entire incident to her. Mr. Thomas listened, then angrily slapped the table. This is outrageous. A newborn child forcibly taken by his father and given to someone else. The court will not tolerate such behavior. I bit my lip and voiced my biggest concern, but I don't have a job now, and my financial situation isn't as good as Knox's. Mr. Thomas patted my hand. Don't worry. Mother has a natural advantage in raising a newborn. Moreover, the other party wants to give the child to a third party for upbringing. We're sure to win this case. After leaving the hospital, I didn't go home but went directly to Mr. Gomez's office to sign the authorization. Then, I went to Logan again. Last time I came back from Logan, I felt something was very wrong. Even if I was overthinking, I had to go and see. This time, Onyx opened the door for me, but Knox wasn't there. Onyx stood blocking the doorway, showing no intention of letting me in. Her gaze swept over my pale face, and her tone carried faint concern. Harper, why are you here again? Didn't the doctor tell you to rest properly? I ignored her, my gaze sweeping past her shoulder into the house. I'm here to see my son. Onyx's face suddenly changed at my words, her eyes instinctively glancing upstairs, but she quickly reverted to her usual expression. She moved slightly further inside, blocking the view more effectively. The baby just fell asleep. A child's sleep is important and shouldn't be disturbed. You should go back first. When he wakes up, you'll have the nanny record a video for you. But the more Onyx tried to stop me, the more worried I became. Moo. I didn't know where I found the strength, but I violently pushed her away. Onyx, caught off guard, stumbled back a few steps, crying out, Mason, what are you doing? I pushed Onyx aside and, driven by instinct, stumbled towards the second floor, in the direction Onyx had just glanced. Onyx tried to stop me, but I ran quickly, rushing directly to the closed bedroom door and forcefully pushing it open. The moment it opened, I was startled. The thick curtains in the room were drawn tight, and only a few thick white candles were lit, making it look eerie. The air was filled with a strong, acrid herbal smell. The gravely ill Ella lay on the bed, her face frighteningly pale, and my child, only a few days old, who should have been sleeping soundly in a warm swaddling blanket, was now tightly held in Onyx's mother's arms. The baby's tiny face was flushed red, and he let out faint cries, but his small mouth was being forced open. She was about to pour a bowl of unknown liquid into the child's forcibly opened mouth. I felt as if struck by lightning, my blood instantly freezing in my veins. No, I screamed and rushed forward, snatching the bowl from Onyx's mother's hand and smashing it onto the floor. The bowl shattered, and the liquid inside splashed everywhere, emitting a pungent odor. The child was finally free, his small mouth opening and closing as he gasped for air, his cries gradually growing louder. I looked at the suffering child in my arms, and my heart ached as if being twisted by a knife. How can you be so cruel? He's just a baby. I glared at Onyx and her mother, my eyes filled with anger and indignation. It was then that I realized they were believers in some ancient superstition, intending to use my child for a dark, superstitious ritual. Onyx's face was pale, her eyes darting nervously, as if she wanted to explain something but couldn't bring herself to speak. Onyx's mother, however, wore a face full of indifference, as if everything that had just happened had nothing to do with her. I hugged the child tightly, terrified he might suffer even the slightest harm again. Everyone in the room was stunned and frozen by the sudden turn of events. But I quickly pulled out my phone and photographed everything before my eyes. Then, before they could react, I rushed out. Onyx's mother reacted, shouting to Onyx, "Onyx, stop her quickly." A pampered young lady like Onyx certainly couldn't run as fast as I could. But as I rushed down the stairs, I ran straight into Knox, who had just returned. Knox saw me rushing down with the child, his face turning ashen. He reached out to block me. "Mason, what's wrong with you now?" Onyx also screamed, "Stop her. She's stealing the baby." I abruptly raised my phone screen, practically shoving the shocking photos I had just taken into his face, my eyes fixed on Knox, my voice cold. "Knox, look at what they were trying to do to your son." Knox froze when he saw my phone screen. When he saw the video clearly, his face instantly drained of color, his lips trembled, and his expression was horrified. "No, impossible," he instinctively retorted, but his voice lacked conviction. "Impossible." Holding the child, I stepped closer to him, roaring with all my might, "Your son was almost force-fed to death with those concoctions, and you tell me this is for his good? Knox, you're an animal, trading your own son's life for your wealth and luxury." I shoved Knox, who was blocking the doorway, and, clutching the child, desperately ran out of Logan. There was a commotion behind me, but I seemed not to hear it, rushing forward with the child in my arms. To the police station, my voice was barely coherent, trembling. On the street, I flagged down a taxi. The driver, seeing my pale face and the crying baby in my arms, didn't ask a single question, and sped away. The little one in my arms must have cried himself out. He finally quieted down, his small body snuggling against me, radiating warmth. I lowered my head and carefully rubbed his cool little cheek, unable to hold back my tears. Large drops fell onto his wrinkled forehead. This tiny life, whom I had brought into the world risking half my own, I had almost lost him forever. Mr. Gomez's actions were quicker than I had anticipated. Because there was a complete chain of evidence, the case was processed quickly. Furthermore, Logan had some influence in the public eye, and the media widely reported on it. Logan clearly hadn't expected me to make a public scene. They tried to buy me off, sending intermediaries to suggest that if I dropped the lawsuit, everything could be settled amicably. But I ignored them. When Knox came to find me, he already had gray hairs, his beard was unkempt, and he had lost a lot of weight. Seeing me, he immediately fell to his knees. "Oliver, I know I was wrong. I truly didn't know they would do that to the child. Onyx tricked me. She said it was just for the baby to stay with Ella for a few days, to absorb some good fortune. How is the child? Is he okay? Let me see him, please. Wife, after all these years together, are you really going to be so heartless? A child can't be without a father." I looked at Knox, the man I had once deeply loved, but now, no matter how much he pleaded, I couldn't forgive him. I raised my hand and slapped him hard, pointing at him and cursing. "Knox, does your conscience not bother you, seeing that now? If it weren't for me, the child might have been tortured to death by them." Knox pleaded desperately. "Wife, I truly know I was wrong. Logan promised a large sum of money. not for us and the child to live comfortably for the rest of our lives. Please forgive me." Hearing Knox's words filled me with even more disgust. Even now, he hadn't offered a single sincere apology. Every word was a justification. Even at this point, he still wanted Logan's money. Knox never cared that the child was almost force-fed something, nor about my injuries, but only about himself. I looked down at him, saying word by word, "Knox, every single word you're saying right now disgusts me beyond measure. Oliver." His voice was trembling uncontrollably. He reached out to touch me, but I stepped back. Onyx really did trick me. I truly didn't know they would force-feed the child those things. That's my son. I used to be soft-hearted and couldn't bear to see Knox upset, but now I only felt tyranny. Your son? I looked at the child sleeping soundly in the crib, definitively severing ties with Knox. Knox, the moment you personally snatched him from me and used him to trade for your future, he stopped being your son. You don't deserve to be his father. Hearing my words, Knox abruptly looked up, his face covered in tears, but a hint of desperation flashed in his eyes. Oliver, how can you think that of me? Yes, I wanted to repay Ella's kindness, but more than that, I wanted our child to be well. With Onyx, he would be born standing on a mountaintop that others could never reach in a lifetime. Knox grew more agitated as he spoke, as if everything he had done was perfectly justified. I love you, Oliver. Everything I did was for our family, for you and the child to have a good life in the future. Why don't you understand? Even now, he was still blaming me for not understanding him. I scoffed. Knox, your so-called good life means letting my son become a tool for someone else's dark, superstitious ritual. You call that love? You call that for the child's good? You call that for our family? I watched his face instantly turn ashen, pressing closer. You have only ever loved yourself. Knox swayed, then his trembling body collapsed to the floor. He couldn't utter another word of defense, only mumbling, You're talking nonsense. I did it all for this family. I didn't have time to listen to him, but just then, my phone rang. I looked down and saw it was Mr. Thomas calling. As soon as I answered, her anxious voice came through. Mason, the police just searched Logan's Skylar and found in the basement. My heart sank, and a sense of dread washed over me. What about the basement? On the other end of the line, Mr. Thomas' voice paused, then spoke again with some anger. The police found 3 children's blood-stained clothes in Logan's basement, and now all the children are missing. My mind went blank. So, my son wasn't the first. So, my child had almost been lost to me forever. Animals, they're all animals. I screamed uncontrollably, trembling with fear as tears instantly blurred my vision. Knox, who was slumped on the floor, clearly heard snippets of the phone call. He abruptly looked up at me, then at the child in the crib, his eyes filled with terror. Knox stammered incoherently, "No, impossible. Onyx, she just..." I looked down at him, feeling a chill and disgust at the thought of him still defending Onyx. Knox, this is the Logan you wanted to repay. This is the Onyx you adored. You almost personally killed our child. Knox's eyes were bloodshot as he looked at me and cried, "Oliver, I really messed up." He finally knew he had made a mistake, but it was already too late. My voice was terrifyingly calm. "Knox, you'd better pray you have absolutely nothing to do with this, or none of you will escape." Onyx and her mother were both arrested. Ella passed away that very night upon hearing the news, whether from her illness or from sheer anger. No one knew. Blake was suddenly in disarray. The massive internal deficits and illegal financing issues could no longer be covered up and were immediately exposed. And Knox, who Ella had practically raised as a son during her lifetime, naturally became the target of public outrage. The police, Luna, uncovered a series of company issues, and the chain of evidence pointed firmly to Knox. After her initial breakdown and denial, Onyx, to protect herself, shrieked during interrogation. It was all Knox's idea. He said children from poor families are expendable, and no one would care if they went missing. He's the mastermind. Knox became the perfect scapegoat, but I believe he was not innocent either. Soon, the corporation declared bankruptcy. Onyx and her mother were sentenced to death, while Knox received a life sentence. Knox appealed continuously, but it was useless. The verdicts remained surprisingly consistent. During this period, he kept pleading for me to visit him again, but I refused every time, until the dust settled. Holding my half-year-old son, I stood before the prison's glass window, looking at Knox, who was wearing a gray-blue prison uniform and had a shaved head. Knox used to be so spirited and ambitious, but now only despair remained. making him look like a man in his late 40s or 50s. He almost lunged at the glass, his eyes fixed on the child in my arms, and a smile appeared on his face. The child curiously looked at the stranger behind the glass, but then suddenly became a little scared, puckering his lips and snuggling deeper into my embrace. Oliver, sir, Knox's voice was hoarse, his fingers trembling as they pressed against the cold glass, pleading desperately. I was wrong. I truly was wrong. I was utterly deluded. It was all that wretch Onyx. She tricked me. She's the one who brought me to this. Oliver, please forgive me. Wait for me. Wait for me to get out. We can still be a family. Family? I calmly interrupted his hysteria. Knox, the moment you took my son away from me, we stopped being a family. Knox's face was filled with despair when he heard my words. I looked at the man I had once deeply loved, and slowly said, I didn't come here today to listen to your confessions. I gently swayed my son in my arms. The child, feeling his mother's presence, curiously darted his dark, brick-like eyes around. I just want you to see him, to see this child you almost destroyed with your own hands. He's living well now. He doesn't need your worthless fatherly love. He has me, and that's enough. Knox's body trembled violently. He seemed about to say something, but in the end, he didn't. As for forgiveness, I paused, my gaze calmly meeting his broken one, a faint smile even touching my lips. Knox, I forgive you. Knox stiffened abruptly, a flicker of disbelief in his eyes as he looked at me with a hint of hope. Really? He asked hoarsely, his voice laced with humble expectation. I nodded, my tone calm, as if stating a fact unrelated to myself. I forgive you, not because your repentance is sincere, nor because you are still worthy of forgiveness. I leaned slightly forward, closer to the microphone, enunciating each word with perfect clarity, but because from this moment on, you, and everything about you, will have absolutely nothing to do with me, or with my son, ever again. To me, you are utterly dead. On the other side of the glass, the last trace of joy vanished from Knox's face. He slumped heavily to the floor, letting out a dull thud. I cast one last glance at Knox, huddled in a heap on the other side. Without a shred of lingering feeling, I held my son in my arms, turned, and walked purposefully out of the visitation room, without looking back. As I walked out of the prison, the heavy iron gate slowly closed behind me. Outside the gate, sunlight bathed me, a comforting warmth. I looked down. My son was looking up at me with his tiny face, his dark, bright eyes reflecting the sunlight. He parted his gummy little mouth, making soft sounds, a chubby little hand stretching out, trying to touch me. I held him closer, pressing my cheek gently against his soft, warm forehead. My voice was gentle. Don't be scared, baby, mommy's here. The child smiled up at me, carrying my child. I strode forward, new path stretched out before me, bathed in light.